What is up, everyone, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the 3&D here on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. Make sure you hit subscribe below and follow our socials at the 3&D ETB. On tonight's episode, we'll be taking a look at a few huge transactions that have gone on, one potential one that's going to happen, including Chris Paul, potential landing spots for him, potential landing spots for another big-time free agent, and another head coaching hire as well. And then, of course, the Denver Nuggets are your 2023 NBA champions. They got to raise up their first ever banner this past weekend. So hope everybody's doing well. And a lot of NBA stuff to get to, a lot of NBA. Obviously with the season winding down, the NBA Finals winding down, the Nuggets were able to close out the Miami Heat 4-1. Nikola Jokic had an incredible playoff run. We'll get to some of that later. But first topic is supposedly, we don't know if it's for sure, but Suns plan on waiving Chris Paul. So there's been a lot of reports going back and forth. We heard a couple weeks ago that they were planning on waiving him. We also heard that they might keep him. Then we also heard that they might waive him and restructure his contract, even though they owe him like $40 million next season. It's a whole big mess right now, but the Suns are still trying to figure things out. They obviously just ended their relationship with Monty Williams. They bring in Frank Vogel next year. Kevin Durant and Devin Booker are still trying to, get used to each other and get a little bit of a duo going there. But apparently the Suns are planning on waiving Chris Paul. So that brings up a lot of different topics if they decide to do that. And that mostly being what is the best potential landing spot for Chris Paul if he ends up getting waived. It's a very, very interesting one because there is very few that I think are actually better situations for him than the Suns. He fits. I think he fits well with the Suns. I think he plays off the ball. He's a good passer. Doesn't need the ball in his hands to be dominant. Good defender too, and can definitely succeed around Booker as he's already done, and around Kevin Durant if you give them an entire season. They're all fully healthy. I think those are all definitely very true. But again, some of the top landing spots, though, that some people have come across. First, the New York Knicks. So, of course, anytime a big-time player gets waived or is a free agent or anything, the Knicks are going to pop up as a rumored destination. Obviously, Russell Westbrook's a free agent this offseason. People are already talking about how they should sign him. And it's pretty crazy. But Chris Paul going to the Knicks, the pro of it would be pair him alongside Jalen Brunson. He doesn't need to be Jalen Brunson can play more of the two. And even though Brunson's a great ball handler, he's become an even better scorer. So that could be a huge plus. But in my personal opinion, he's really not the best fit for the Knicks. I mean, they with the direction that they're going, I think that Jalen Brunson is the point guard. And I think they need more three-point shooting. They need more scorers, and Chris Paul is not really much of a scorer. Good defensive player, good passer, can facilitate the offense, but they don't necessarily need that very much. But of course, if Chris Paul's on the market, you're going to hear so much rumors about the Knicks, looking at him. I immediately would shoot it down. As a Knicks fan, I don't love the fit. I love Chris Paul as a player, always have. But he's just not the best fit for what the Knicks are doing and for kind of like the direction that they're headed. Another interesting one, though, is the San Antonio Spurs. So obviously the Spurs, deep into a rebuild, had a terrible year this year, but they landed the first overall pick. They're set to take Victor Wembanyama first overall next Thursday for the NBA draft. Just a little preview to the NBA draft special. It's going to be next week. We're going to have a lot of NBA draft coverage. It's going to be great. But Wembanyama obviously is the overwhelming favorite to be the first overall pick. And the Spurs are going to add him to their list of dominant first overall picks with David Robinson and Tim Duncan. So I think that would be a very, very interesting move. The pros to it would be Chris Paul could 100% help with the development of Wembanyama. Obviously, plays off the pick and roll. Wembanyama can do whatever he's able to do on offense, and Chris Paul can help facilitate that, get him into better scoring situations. I think that it's a best case scenario for the Spurs. It's more of a better fit for the Spurs than it is for Chris Paul. So obviously would play great off the pick and roll with Victor, but the cons of it is Chris Paul's aging. He's getting a little bit older now, and if he wants to, he's going to be trying to win a title. And the Spurs, even if when they add Wembanyama and if they add Chris Paul, they're still not an NBA title contender just yet. They still have a few more pieces that they need to start adding. They just entered the rebuild like this past year or two. But obviously, when you got a Greg Popovich coach team and you got a future Hall of Famer like Chris Paul and a stud talent like Wembanyama, anything can happen. But that's more of a fit that I think the Spurs would probably be praying for rather than Chris Paul. I don't know if he'd really take that extremely seriously. And then of course Los Angeles Lakers is another one. The third option out of the four that I have. Obviously with LeBron, AD, they're going to be looking to add another big piece. LeBron and AD both have 1-year deals going into this season, and then they're ready to become free agents. So Chris Paul could, in fact, sign a 1-year deal, and they can all try to team up for one season, see if they can do anything next year. I think I think it could work. Chris Paul playing alongside LeBron and Anthony Davis. I feel like LeBron though, Chris Paul's numbers would be very further down, mainly because Chris Paul's the facilitator, and when you got a guy like LeBron, he's the facilitator and the scorer on offense. And it's an interesting situation if you kind of add like a pure point guard to that. We saw what kind of happened with Russell Westbrook. I mean, Russell Westbrook's a different player than Chris Paul for sure, but it was a weird situation that obviously didn't pan out, and nobody was really able to succeed with the kind of the people around them. So to be honest with you, if this were to happen, almost like see the same thing. I don't think anybody in the NBA right now is scared of a LeBron, AD, and Chris Paul big three. If we're talking about like 4 or 5 years ago, completely different. But we're as of right now, I do not think that it's that great. I mean, obviously, Lakers could get him for cheap, and they could be a contender if they do get him. But the cons of it is the Lakers have very little salary cap wiggle room right now. They are giving Anthony Davis a lot of money. They're giving LeBron James a lot of money, and they got a bunch of top free agents. Pretty much their entire bench are free agents this offseason, including D'Angelo Russell and Austin Reeves and Lonnie Walker. And those are all guys that they're going to have to decide on and decide what their future is with the team. If they want to bring those guys back, if they can even afford to bring those guys back, the kind of money that Russell might get, the kind of money that Reeves might get. And, if they end up wanting one of those guys back and matching one of the offers that they get, they may not be able to have enough salary cap wiggle room unless Chris Paul were to take like a veteran minimum or something like that to join the Lakers, which would be interesting. I mean, he's already owed about like $40 million by the Suns this next season, and then I think he's a free agent after next year. But makes it all the more interesting for if he ends up getting waived. And then the last destination that I think could be somewhat enticing is the Chicago Bulls. So the Bulls kind of underperformed this year. Obviously, they have DeRozan and LaVine, two of the best scorers in the NBA, but they didn't really have too much defense. They didn't have much around it, and they're planning on trying to re-sign Nikola Vucevic, which would be great. I think he would play great off the pick and roll with Chris Paul if you add that to the team. I think that he could be a good fit with DeRozan and LaVine too, because both of those guys dominate on the ball. They're both big time scorers, and obviously Chris Paul being the passer, the facilitator that he is, I think that could actually be a pretty decent fit. And to be able to squeeze him in there, and especially with Vucevic too. I think that Vucevic, if they're able to re-sign him, Chris Paul, that's the kind of big man that Chris Paul would be very, very good to play with, who can stretch the floor, hit the three, and is a good time scorer. But then the cons of it, as always, they had a down year this year, and could be tough to truly compete even if they had Chris Paul, because the Eastern Conference is tough. There's a lot of powerhouses now. And we'll see how free agency goes. There could be more powerhouses coming in, but a big three of DeRozan, Levine, and Chris Paul, I'm not too sure that's an extreme title contender. So I think that really the only two situations where he could be a legitimate title contender is if he stays with the Suns, decides to restructure his contract, whatever they want to do. Obviously, the Suns are the other destination too, and the Lakers too. Even though the Lakers have underperformed the last couple of years, LeBron and AD are both towards the end of their career. If they were to add Chris Paul and they were to add some other good pieces, obviously you can never count out the Lakers. They went from having a terrible start to the season. They made it all the way to the Western Conference Finals, even though they got destroyed by the Nuggets. It was surprising that they went from play-in to the Western Conference Finals this season. So they could be contenders. But again, the Suns are probably his best bet. I mean, I could see him trying to end his career with the Suns. He's bounced around from a few different teams. Didn't do anything with the Clippers, wasn't able to do anything with the Rockets, was with OKC very shortly and completely overperformed with that team, brought them to the playoffs, even though he was like the only piece on that team. And then, of course, the Suns, who have Devin Booker, they've got DeAndre Ayton, they have Kevin Durant, and they already have some pieces. I think what's really going to decide it for the Suns mostly is how healthy Kevin Durant stays, because the losing Michael Bridges and Cameron Johnson, the pieces that they did, those were two extremely important pieces, especially Michael Bridges. I mean, Bridges was the defender. He was the lockdown guy. He kind of evened out the starting rotation with Booker, who's offensive minded, DeAndre Ayton, who's offensive minded. Bridges, obviously he's a defensive player of the year candidate just a year ago, and then jumped over to the Nets, averaging 20 points a game since he went over to the Nets. So he's a great player. And to be honest, when that trade first happened, a lot of people were probably just like, wow, like the Suns are stacked. Like they're definitely going to win a championship now and all that stuff. It's not a guarantee, because I'm not too sold on Durant playing alongside in Phoenix and like seeing what he can do, how he'll mesh with the team, all that kind of stuff. I think it'll be it's still to be determined how competitive they really get. So Suns plan on waiving Chris Paul. We don't know really what's going to happen right now. Obviously, it's just talk. There's no specific move that happened. It seems like they're going to the direction of waiving him. But there's been conflicting reports. So of course, maybe they try to trade him too. But those are all the top destinations that I would bet on if I was going to bet where Chris Paul ends up landing if he doesn't come back to the Phoenix Suns. And then another big free agent that is set to hit the market definitely this offseason is James Harden. James Harden re-signed with the 76ers last offseason to a 1 year plus a 1 year player option. So he's got a $35.6 million player option. He's planning on declining it. And he's reportedly torn between the Rockets and the Sixers as his two top destinations, which is very interesting because two teams that are on completely different paths. Obviously, Harden spent the majority of his career with the Rockets and was very competitive with them, but they traded him away to Brooklyn a couple of years ago, and they entered a rebuild right then. And they've had a few top picks, but Harden seems like he's legitimately interested in possibly rejoining the Rockets. And then the 76ers, obviously, he's with right now. They underperformed in the playoffs a little bit this year, like they tend to do. They're one of those teams that is so close, similar to what the Nuggets were before this season. They're so close, so dominant in the regular season, but had not been able to get over the hump in the postseason. And they're going to be looking to obviously try to break that. And James Harden, I feel like, is a big piece for that. So they're going to try hard to bring him back. Regardless, he's going to get a contract well over the $35 million that his player option was. Whether he deserves it or not is up to you guys to decide. But he's somebody. If the Rockets want him, they're going to have to give him 40-ish. If the Sixers want him, they're going to have to give him 40-ish. He's definitely going to get a pay raise this offseason because he had a pretty solid season this year. I mean, he was on and off in the playoffs like he tends to be, but he was not bad. He was pretty consistent as a point guard as well, and he's starting to get up there in age, but he's still looking for that title. So the Rockets and the Sixers are very interesting. Another team, though, a third team that's kind of out of the discussion that is interesting to think about is the Phoenix Suns. So the Suns do not have very much cap space, but if they're able to get rid of Chris Paul and get somebody to take on that contract, they could afford to bring in a top paid guy like James Harden. And that would be extremely interesting. I saw that rumor on Twitter. Obviously, NBA Twitter goes every which way, as all basketball fans know. Some of the stuff you hear is just crazy and outlandish. Some of the stuff kind of makes a little bit of sense. The Suns doesn't really make too much sense, I don't think, because he's a guy that the ball's got to be in his hands to dominate. And that's the same thing with Durant, the same thing with Booker. You got three of those guys who are all trying to look to chuck up a shot on every single possession. So I don't think he meshes really well with them. I think that the Suns need to focus on Durant and Booker are their two main scorers. DeAndre Ayton is their big, who's like their third additional scorer. And then every other scoring option after that is mainly a role player or a facilitator like Chris Paul and so on, basically. So that's more of the direction that they're headed. I wanted to mention it just because I saw it on Twitter and it looked actually like pretty interesting. I'm not too sure why they're thinking too much about the Phoenix Suns because there's a lot they have to do too. They don't have much salary cap space, obviously, with paying three guys their huge contracts. So they'd have to probably get rid of Chris Paul's entire contract to even fit that in. But realistically, the Rockets and the 76ers are the two main spots. And then the pros and cons for both of them. The Rockets have had top picks in the last few drafts, obviously, from not being good, and have put together a pretty good young core. Jalen Green is becoming a 20-plus point per game scorer. Kevin Porter Jr., they picked up on the scrap heap from the Cleveland Cavs, and he's turned himself into a great point guard, a good three-point shooter. He's a good passer. Alperen Sengun, too, is one of the better international prospects over the last couple of years. He's been very solid for them. And then Jabari Smith, who was their top pick last year, had a decent rookie season. Wasn't as obviously as good as Banchero and a few other rookies, but it wasn't terrible. He looked decent. It looks like he can kind of develop into a pretty solid player. And then obviously they have the 4th overall pick next Thursday night in the 2023 draft. So they're going to end up with, currently I have them taking Jarris Walker, who's power forward from Houston, make him stay in the area and join the Rockets. But they're going to have a lot of options with the 4th pick. You got the Thompson twins. You're going to have Hendricks. You're going to have Whitmore. There's a lot of different ways that they can go with the 4th pick. Obviously, the top 3 guys, Victor is going to go number 1, and then 2 and 3 is going to be Scoot and Brandon Miller in any order that you want to predict. As of right now, it's going to be interesting. We really probably won't find out who goes second until it's announced. I don't think anybody's going to end up leaking it. because it seems like teams are going back and forth. But then they also have the fourth pick. And another big thing that I think is the most intriguing factor about going back to the Rockets is Ime Udoka is now their head coach, a guy that every NBA player loves. He did a great job with the Celtics, bringing them to the NBA Finals in his first season as their head coach. Obviously, had some scandals and a lot of issues, and ended up leaving the Celtics not on the greatest note. And Joe Mazzulla took over, and now he was out of the NBA for a year. A lot of teams were looking at him, but the Rockets had Steven Silas the last couple of years. Did not do anything with him. He lost the locker room, wasn't the greatest coach. But Ime Udoka is coming in to mold this young core. And if you add James Harden to it, I mean, that's a pretty solid team. Are they an NBA? Are they a title contender? No, not at all. Unless Jalen Green takes a step to becoming an all-star, or one of these other guys develop a lot better. If you add James Harden to it, they're a play-in team. I think that they're like a 7 through 10 seed. They can compete for in the West with how many good young players that they have, and then obviously James Harden could be their number one scorer. I think that they'd be a solid team, but I don't think that they'd be a title contender just yet. But if Harden's willing to go back to the Rockets on a multi-year deal and like kind of wait it out, let these guys develop alongside him, and let the Rockets acquire some more draft picks, maybe make a trade with all the draft picks that they have coming up to get some more veterans, it'll be interesting to see. So the Rockets, obviously, he likes it in Houston, and the Sixers. The other side of it too is the Sixers. I mean, obviously, Sixers are much more ready to compete. They're an NBA title contender, and if they re-sign James Harden, they're going to be one of the favorites to win the Eastern Conference and make it to the NBA Finals, even though they haven't been able to get over that hump. I mean, obviously, you have the MVP, Joel Embiid. You got Tobias Harris. You got Tyrese Maxey. You got a good all-around team, and now Doc Rivers is gone, and Nick Nurse is now the head coach. So it makes things very, very interesting as an all-around situation, because I think the Sixers, they're much more interesting if they have Harden. And there's now the rumor that's going around that the Rockets, if they don't land James Harden, they're going to go after Kyrie Irving really, really hard. So they got a bunch of money saved up. They want a star player like that. And it's pretty interesting to see, honestly. But Harden, deciding between those two teams realistically, and the 76ers. The 76ers are much more ready to compete, and it would if he wants to stay on title contender and win an NBA, try to compete to win an NBA Finals within the next couple of years, he definitely stays with the Sixers. But it's going to be an interesting choice, because I mean, no one would have ever thought that the Rockets were kind of in the hunt for James Harden, would be a realistic candidate for him to go back there, especially after he demanded a trade just a few years ago when they were kind of somewhat underperforming, and they had Russell Westbrook, and that experiment didn't go well. They're all the way back in it now, and Harden seems like he's interested in them. I think it would be a very interesting fit, but it also goes back to the Chris Paul thing too. Be interesting to see like Harden go back to the Rockets, Chris Paul go to like the Spurs or something like that, and kind of evens out the playing field a little bit in the Western Conference and makes things a little bit more interesting. But we got plenty of time for that. NBA free agency starts July 1st. These guys can start opting out of their contracts within the next couple of weeks. The guys who have player options, guys who have team options, and then the guys who opt out will, of course, hit the market the second it turns July 1st at midnight, and they can start negotiations. They can start talking to teams. So as always, NBA free agency is always so fun. The June 1st and June 2nd are usually two of the best days, because there's a ton of moves that happen. with especially once the day starts. You get a bunch of moves at 1 a.m., 2 a.m. of players who were talking to teams and had an idea of who they wanted to go to. I mean, you could talk all about the about teams talking to players prematurely all you want and that kind of stuff, but pretty much everybody does it. Some teams just get caught, and some teams get punished for it more. But it'll be interesting. Definitely July 1st, NBA free agency. Looking forward to that. And the last head coach hiring now that that we were waiting on. All the head coaching spots are filled now. The Raptors hired Darko Rajakovic to be their next head coach. He's 44 years old, from Serbia. He's been a coach since 1996. He played in Serbia. He didn't play professionally, but he played at the collegiate level, I believe, and started off as a coach of youth team and slowly transitioned his way into the NBA route. He was the head coach of the Tulsa 66ers, which is a G League team, for 2 seasons, 2012 to 2014, and has been an assistant coach since 2014 in the NBA. He was with OKC from 2014 to 2019. He was with the Suns for 1 season in the bubble season, 2019 to 2020. And he's been with the Memphis Grizzlies for the past 3 seasons, from 2020 to now 2023. He was under Taylor Jenkins, one of his top guys, and he got a couple of interviews this offseason, but the Raptors decided to bring him in. He was also the Serbia national team's assistant coach in the FIBA games in 2019. So this guy's got a lot of coaching experience. Not too many people knew the name, but when he first got hired, it wasn't a very sexy name that was enticing to a lot of teams. But it's, he's been a coach. He's been around for a long time, and he's been an assistant for a long time. So he knows the ups and downs, and he'll be taking Nick Nurse's spot now with the Raptors. And the Raptors got a lot of work to do. Fred VanVleet is the first guy to come out and say that he's opting out of his player option. So he's ready to become a free agent on July 1st, and all signs point to him signing somewhere else. Doesn't seem like the Raptors are going to re-sign him. They don't have any top picks this year in the draft, which makes things a lot more interesting, especially for they don't have a top 10 pick, I should say. They do have a lottery pick, but it's at the end of the lottery. But they don't have a top 5, top 10 pick like they did when they got Scotty Barnes, and so they're not going to be landing one of the top guys that's in the NBA draft this year. But they're in a very interesting spot. Obviously, Pascal Siakam, they extended. They got him under contract. Seems like that's the piece that they're going to build around. They have a few other interesting pieces with Gary Trent Jr., who's been good. They might use a couple of these guys as trade bait. Scotty Barnes, I'm sure they're also going to plan on building around. He's been very solid his first 2 years in the NBA. So I think that it's very, very interesting to see how the Raptors are going to move forward, how this hiring is going to do for them, and good for Rajakovic, because he had been long awaiting an NBA head coaching job. And now, with those 3 things out of the way, let's talk some NBA Finals. Denver Nuggets win their first NBA title after beating the Miami Heat this past weekend. And my goodness, that game was absolutely crazy. They went back and forth. I thought we're going into the series. Obviously, me and Hank did the segments on how many games we thought it would go and who wins the series. I took Nuggets in 7. Thought that was kind of a very much given. Honestly, I thought that the Heat were going to make it more of a series, but man, did a lot of teams underestimate how dominant the Nuggets were this year. I mean, they swept the Lakers, and then they nearly swept the Heat. It's pretty crazy, honestly. The Nuggets were always a franchise that have had good seasons. never even made it to an NBA Finals before. The first they made it was the conference finals. They did that once with Carmelo. And they don't have a very storied past. There's not too many legends that played for them. Alex English is, the most notable one. Carmelo, if you want to throw that in there. There are a couple of the more notable ones. Dikembe Mutombo was on them for a few years. But they've had some good players, but they haven't been a storied franchise. And the big thing about this NBA title that I think is very interesting and very interesting and fun is that the Nuggets are not done yet. They're not done yet at all. Like, they are built to keep this thing going for another few years. They have so many guys that are under contract for a while that they were able to they were able to keep around, that they were able to extend and honestly get on like pretty somewhat solid deals. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, he's got 1 year left and then a player option, and Nikola Jokic just signed a huge extension, so he's got 4 years plus a player option. They just re-signed Aaron Gordon to a 2-year to a deal where he's got 2 years left and then a player option. And Michael Porter Jr. has 3 years left plus a player option. And then Jamal Murray has 2 years left and then he hits free agency. So it's crazy because those are their 5 stars. Those are the guys who ran through the Western Conference this year, and they're all under contract. None of them are set to leave anytime soon. So with the Western Conference as very wide open as it is, with a lot of question marks surrounding the Suns, with a lot of question marks with the Lakers and all the other powerhouses, and the Clippers as well, the Nuggets have now proven it, and this might not be their only championship. I think that they can start running the table. Michael Malone is a fantastic head coach. He might end up winning multiple championships. And they also, their bench too. You gotta give a shout out to their bench. I mean, they had a bunch of veterans on their bench who barely played. DeAndre Jordan barely played. Jeff Green played a little bit, but Reggie Jackson barely played. Thomas Bryant barely played. They really only, throughout the entire NBA Finals, the big bench minutes that they got were from Bruce Brown and Christian Brown. That was really it. They didn't see too much time from anyone else. It was really pretty much a 7-man rotation that they kind of went with. And Christian Brown, now a rookie, is the 5th player in NBA history to win a college title and win an NBA title in back-to-back seasons. Magic Johnson was one of them as well, so that was a little interesting fact. But Christian Brown, I think, had a tremendous series too. And Kentavious Caldwell-Pope has 1 year left on his contract. I think when he's gone, after his contract's expired, I think Brown kind of takes over his spot and moves into the starting 2, because he does very similar stuff to what Caldwell-Pope does. He's a good shooter. He's a hustle play kind of guy. And he's a good defender, and he's very athletic too. Very underrated athleticism. And I think that was a great draft pick that they took last year. Brown was kind of snuck into the first round late. He was a good college player. People thought that he could be like a 2nd round pick, and then had a very good tournament. And then when Kansas won the national title, kind of put his name out on the map a little bit more. And then he performed at the combine and was able to do very solidly. So very, very interesting to see. It's definitely very interesting to see if, like, what is going to happen between the Nuggets and their future and the rest of the Western Conference, and if they're able to keep running the table. But big shout out to them. Miami Heat are in a tough situation. It sucks for them. I mean, Eric Spoelstra now has lost 4 NBA championships while only winning 2. So he's 2-4 in the NBA Finals. Obviously, Jimmy Butler is now 0-2 in the NBA Finals, and didn't really put up much of a fight in either series, in the bubble against the Lakers and in this series. But again, the Heat honestly arguably shouldn't have even been in the playoffs. They lost the first play-in game, and then they won to get the 8th seed. and they're the first 8 seed to beat a 1 seed in many, many years. So they can't hang their heads too low, and they also got a bunch of guys who are about to make a lot of money this offseason. Gabe Vincent, Caleb Martin, and Max Strus all set to become free agents. They're all going to get some solid contracts. The Heat are going to have a tough time keeping them, especially Max Strus too, because Strus is a knockdown 3-point shooter. Was a great defender throughout the playoffs. There's a lot of teams that are going to be looking at him. I think Gabe Vincent too. His height kind of like holds him back a little bit, but I think that he can definitely he'll definitely end up getting a ton of money throughout it. So Denver Nuggets win their first NBA title, and now it's the NBA season is officially over. NBA draft coming up. We got NBA free agency coming up, but the 2022-23 season is officially wrapped up. So already can't wait for October to roll around and the new season to start. But it's the Denver Nuggets. I was very pleased with it. I'm glad. I didn't care really who won the series. I wanted the Nuggets to win, but I'm very pleased with the outcome of it. So very happy about that. And that'll do it for another episode of the 3&D. I want to thank everyone for tuning into the Empty the Bench podcast network for my third episode. Once again, make sure you like and subscribe to this channel and follow our socials at the 3&D ETB. Follow right there on youtube.com/ETB network. We'll be putting out content all week from this episode in case you missed the entire episode. And NBA draft coming up next week. We're going to have a lot of NBA draft coverage. We're going to have a special episode 4 going next week. We're going to have a lot of draft coverage. My mock draft will come out. So everybody, make sure you follow Empty the Bench on all platforms. Make sure you follow 3&D on all platforms. So you'll be able to see my mock draft. And if you haven't, you can see my top 100 as well. If you haven't been paying attention to the college route or any of the NBA draft, I got you covered. We'll catch you up on everything. So hope everyone has a great night. And the countdown to the NBA draft is now on since the NBA Finals is over. Thanks, everyone.